Now, no doubt you've noticed in music that sometimes there are chords that are played or a sequence of notes, and some sound quite happy, but then others sound quite sad. There is a reason behind that, and the reason is that the sequence of notes that are used in those chords are different scales. So, happy being a major, sad being minor. Now, of course, this is a massive generalization because in the whole scope of music, there's quite a number of different scales and modes, all that don't just convey different emotions, but different feels that are unique to every person that's listening to them. That's the beauty of music. So, this is going to be a fairly simplified lesson as to the two most basic scales, being the major and the natural minor scale. So I'll start with the major scale. Again, with this being based around the real happy kind of sound, this is a sequence of notes with different spacing between each note. Now when we talk about tonality and the distance between notes, we talk about tones and semitones. Now, without going into specifics, on the guitar, each fret, the distance between one fret to the next when we talk about tonality, is one semitone. And of course, two semitones being one tone. So, if we start with a G on the low E string, move up one fret, that distance there is a semitone. And if we go up 2 frets, then that distance is a tone. This is how we work out major and minor scales. So let's start with the major scale. Again, being the happy sounding scale. The distance between notes, starting with your first note in the scale, in this case being a G, and I'll refer to that as being the root note. So from the root note, the distance between notes when you're climbing up is tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Now that's a very dumbed down approach to it, going up that one string, and that's not the most ideal way that we can approach scales. Definitely not the most ideal way to approach scales. Usually we will approach scales across multiple strings, because when it comes to actually using them, you don't want to have to be doing that kind of thing all the time, going up the one string. You've got 6 strings and a lot of frets to use, so you might as well use them. So I'll teach you one quite simple form of playing the major scale across 1 and across 2 octaves. So starting with the first one being the G major scale across 1 octave. Starting with the G. Now that's 1 octave because that is going from the low G to the high G, which is 1 octave away. You notice how both of those notes have quite a similar tonal quality, but one is lower, one is higher. Essentially they're the same note, but they're not. One's just higher. Now, you can also spread that out across 2 octaves, which is the way that I generally tend to drill my scales, and also go up different frets. So let's start with the same octave as what we just did. And that's 2 octaves of that scale. And usually if you're jamming along with something G major, you can play those notes comfortably knowing that they will fit the mood of the chords that are being played. But of course, many pieces use many different chords, and this is the very fun part of using all these different scales and whatnot. And the great thing about the shape that I just showed you there is that that shape is movable to any note starting from the 6th string. So why don't we try from the B. because it's only using the distance between notes that I taught before, the tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. It's pretty cool. Now, the next scale that I will teach is the more sad sounding one, and that's one of two minor scales that I'll probably refer to across my videos, or one of two minor scales that I'll refer to across these videos. That's a minor chord. You can see it sounds much sadder than the major. Now, the distance between notes with the minor scale, very similar to the major scale, except you have the third note with the major scale, which I'll just bring it up here. So the third note is lowered. So instead of going or, and the seventh is lowered as well. So instead of it going the minor scale, or like I discussed with the previous major scale, and I'll see if I actually have any success reeling this off the top of my head because I'm more familiar with the major scale, but in terms of tonality and the distance between notes, starting with the root note again, being the G, it is tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone. So again, that one, starting with the root note, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, tone, tone. And that is the natural minor. Now, a position that I usually will use to play around with this one involves a bit of stretching. It's a bit of a tricky, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 string stretch that I will sometimes use. It's really good practice. If you don't get this straight off the bat, that's okay, keep trying, because I promise you it will get easier the more that you play around. But if you really start hurting, stop, because you don't want to injure yourself. But just practice it, eventually it becomes easier. And it's a really good part of actually learning to play guitar, is learning these great stretches. So, let's start with the G minor scale, starting with the root note of G on the 6th string. I'll play this slowly so you can get the shape. And that's across one octave. Now, of course, you can play that across 2 octaves as well. And that's where those big stretches come in. Quite difficult to start with. I remember years ago when I first started playing and started doing those stretches, it really hurt, but I slowed down and made sure I didn't hurt myself, and I advise you to do the same thing as well. So to recap, major, that's your happy sounding, and your minor, which is your more sad sounding. And one last thing I want to introduce to you, which is a bit of an interesting concept, and this really paves the way later on for modes, which is a really interesting thing that you really enjoy learning. If you haven't already, just check out the videos at the side. If I haven't published the video yet, it will be out soon. Major, let's play this across 2 octaves. Now, let's say I've got all of those notes still in place, but instead of starting from the root note, let's start from the 6th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a minor scale, and that's using all the notes that are actually in the G major scale. And that is because every major scale has what is called a relative minor scale, and that's using notes from that scale. So even though I'm playing the notes of a G major scale, I'm just starting and stopping at a different point. And that is where minor scales come from. They're derived from the 6th note of the scale. So for example, let's use the C major scale as a really bare bones way of doing this. In C major scale, the C major scale is the only major scale with no sharps and no flats. So C major is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. But then if we count up to the 6th note, C, D, E, F, G, A, and then we know that in that case, because there are no sharps and flats, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A is the A minor scale, A natural minor. Let that be some food for thought. And if you want to learn more about relatives and how they translate into modes, which is a really fun and quite tricky part of playing guitar, then check out the videos on the side. And if there's any out there, which hopefully I will publish that video soon, then check it out. But in the meantime, get jamming on your major and minor scales. Thanks for watching.